Multidimensional humans are humans that consciously exist in many different places all at once. Humans are mutating, or evolving, into beings with the ability to flip from one station to another, and to understand the grandness of who they are, that they do not end where the skin ends. Human beings do not end where the aura or etheric body ends. They exist in many different realities. Barbara Marciniak, Bringers of the Dawn. Introduction. Before writing this, I never would have thought of myself as an author, but I suppose I have always been a writer of sorts. It feels more appropriate to call myself an artist and musician. I make my living as a graphic designer and art director, and I spend my off hours fathering my son and writing and recording music wherever possible. In our world, we seem to be defined by what we do. But along with these labels we give ourselves to project how we prefer to be perceived by others, comes many other facets of our being which most of us might choose not to label or even talk about. Many of us have a rich inner life that is difficult to put into words, which fills the space inside our minds, but we exclude it from descriptions about ourselves, even though it is quite a big piece of who we are. It's often the thing that drives us to do what we do in the external world. For example, in the background of chasing my long-held dream to make a career in music and working 40 hours a week as a designer, I've experienced strange supernatural things along the way which, until now, I didn't know what to do with. These experiences have informed my perspective on life and spirituality, and over the decades, I suppose a fair amount of that has spilled over into my creative work. But this book is the first time that those experiences will take center stage and step into the spotlight. This all unfolded rather organically, as I was sitting in bed late one night, playing some stupid game on my phone in order to wind down, and I was reflecting on the recent encounters I've had with what I can only describe as interdimensional and/or extraterrestrial beings. After a few minutes, the idea of writing a book about these experiences popped into my head, seemingly out of nowhere. At first, I thought this was just the usual chatter of my mind, but for some reason I paused and asked myself, should I really do that? Not a second went by before I heard a loud ringing in my ears. The same ringing that the ETs use to induce the contact experiences. To me, the answer was loud and clear. And when these kinds of things happen, it is usually a message or a nudge from the beings or my spirit guides, or maybe even some higher dimensional aspect of myself, a confirmation in this case that I should write this book. I have come to trust these little nudges from the beings because they don't happen all the time, and they certainly don't happen when I ask myself about trivial things. Apparently, this was not a trivial thing. It's almost as if the beings induce this ringing sound, I'm assuming that's how it works, as a form of communication when a really important thought occurs, to emphasize the importance of it. Once I realized that they wanted me to proceed, I had to start thinking seriously about writing. I've written lyrics, poetry, and expressed myself in words since I was a teenager. And during that time, I attempted to write short stories and even a novel once, with little success. It always seemed intimidating and daunting to me how an author could fill so many pages with words, while making each one feel absolutely essential. I just didn't have that much to say, and I wasn't even sure it was necessary to write so much to convey my ideas. Lyrics were a much more realistic goal. Maybe I should stick to that. But I never imagined that if I wrote a book, it would be something like this. As risky as it is for me to come out and talk about what is contained within this book, for how it will change how some people see me, I know that it is time to tell my story, for better or worse. I've tried for decades to work this paranormal side of myself into my normal life. I've written songs about it, made paintings, etc. None of those things were able to reach the target audience as far as I know, and they certainly didn't allow me to fully unpack everything in the way that writing can. And as it turns out, I have plenty of words to fill up the pages when it comes to writing about these things. From the moment I first sat down at the computer and began writing, it has flowed almost effortlessly out of me, as though I'm channeling some all knowing aspect of myself that has the whole entire book already figured out and is simply telling me what to write. I hope he knows what he's doing. We accept the reality of our own world, but when it comes to other people's realities, we're skeptical. Marlon, The Truman Show. The Watchers. This book contains journal entries detailing my contact with what I believe to be interdimensional and or extraterrestrial beings, which began in full swing during the summer of 2021. Looking back throughout my life, there were signs and clues along the way, from early childhood up to now, which appear to have foreshadowed all of this. Ever since my sister Victoria and I were little, we shared a fascination with the paranormal, particularly with regards to the possibility of alien life. Anytime there was even the slightest mention of a UFO sighting or alien-related content on TV, we'd drop what we were doing and rush to go see if they would finally tell us something. But it was always an underwhelming production with sparse information and terrible footage. It was as if these programs were simply intended to pique the viewer's interest in the subject, with no intention of actually divulging anything of any real significance. This drove us to search elsewhere for the answers, within ourselves, and to ask friends and relatives about their experiences. That was often just as disappointing as the empty UFO programs on TV. Nobody seemed to know anything about anything. In a lot of ways, she and I both felt a little alien sometimes. We used to talk secretly to each other about how we felt like we were always being watched by someone or something. We couldn't see them, but we knew they were there, somewhere. This was an innate sixth sense that she and I possessed, and it was enough to propel us both into a lifetime of spiritual seeking and a search for answers. When the movie The Truman Show came out, we both felt as though this was some sort of message, a confirmation that what we felt as kids was not just our imagination, but something that other people suspected about their reality too. In the movie, Truman is observed by television producers living inside the moon, who orchestrate and plan out his entire life, unbeknownst to him, in order to make his journey end up the way they've written it, for the entertainment of their viewers. He doesn't know he's being filmed, but he senses that something about his reality isn't quite right. For Victoria and I, the question was always, who are the Watchers? Guardian angels? Ghosts? Aliens? All of the above? She and I were both born with a faint yet persistent knowing that the things we perceive with the five senses are not all there is, but rather a curated experience showcased by the mechanics of the human body, designed to focus our attention through a very specific aperture, the third dimension, aka the human experience. We imagined that one day we might fully develop our psychic abilities, pushing the limitations of the human experience, and not only be able to communicate telepathically or move things with our minds, but also interface directly with spirits and all manner of otherworldly beings. This wasn't just a fascination, though. It was a feeling we remembered of having had these abilities before birth, in some other life, and that's why we knew they were possible. Now, we found ourselves stripped of our power and relegated to some primitive state, which everyone else seemed to think was perfectly normal and fine. I think we both felt deep inside ourselves a drive to get our powers back, but that faded with time, proving to be as futile as swimming upstream. We became preoccupied with the complications of life and the minutiae of our incarnations. And I can't speak for Victoria, but for me, whenever I found myself getting seriously invested in my human life, something would happen to snap me out of it and remind me that things are not what they seem, and that there is more to life than what's on the surface. To not give up the search for answers, to keep trying to develop the psychic abilities. Something has always guided me to walk between the two worlds and stay there, never settling in one or the other. Victoria and I have remained very close since childhood, and we often talk in depth about our present day spiritual and paranormal experiences. In fact, she and her friend Logan are the only other people I know personally who also have ongoing contact with the ETs as I do. Their story, however, is not mine to tell, but I think it's worth pointing out how weird it is that she and I would both have these incredible experiences. Do we possess some rare gene that enables us to interface with different dimensions and beings from other realities? Or is there something else at play here? I'm still waiting on the answer to that one. For now, I try to focus on how fortunate I am to have someone I'm close with who understands exactly what I'm experiencing. It can be quite a lonely path. I am very blessed and grateful to have her alongside me on this strange and perplexing journey. Frequencies of reality. It was Victoria who first started having these very intense and surreal contact experiences a few years before me. As I'll explain later, I was quite skeptical of what she was telling me, and sadly, it wasn't until they started happening to me that I fully and completely believed her. So, for what it's worth, I understand how it sounds when I say I'm being visited by interdimensional beings. I'm all too familiar with the knee jerk reaction you might feel when you hear stories like mine, as you say to yourself exactly as you're conditioned to. Okay, sure, man. My hope with this book is that I will be able to convince you, at least in some small way, that these things are real and that they do happen to people. What you do with that information from there is for you to decide. Something to consider is that, scientifically speaking, the human eye is only able to detect a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. This tiny fraction, 0.0035%, is called the visible light spectrum, or, in simple terms, everything that is visible to the human eye. We can see scientifically how blind we are, but we still don't know very much about what's right in front of us. The same is true of the audible spectrum, and perhaps the other senses as well. That would explain why there are so many things that exist, from ultraviolet to infrared to dark matter, etc., that we just can't seem to pick up with the human body's senses alone. Whether or not we've been engineered to be that way is a topic for another time. But for now, I just wanted to simply underline the fact that there is much that exists in other frequencies of reality that most of us accept as completely normal. So why is it so hard to believe that other kinds of intelligence may also exist in those areas outside of our perception? Like television channels or radio stations, in which the device is tuned to a specific frequency, so too are our brains. I believe that the experiences of my early childhood may have had something to do with the ETs tampering with my brain in order to enable me to pick up some of these different frequencies of reality that not everyone can perceive. Why me? Dimensions and densities. In the experiences that you're about to read, I am being taken to other dimensions by the ETs, so I'd like to explain what that means by defining a few terms. Throughout this book, I will refer to densities and dimensions. There are important differences between the two words, as I'll explain. As far as I'm aware, there is no authority on this, and what I'm about to describe is simply a model for thinking about different layers of reality from the human perspective, as I understand it. From here, the experiences I've had will have some ground to stand on with respect to where they take place. The concept of densities is something that has been used by many people in the field of ufology, New Age spirituality, and other esoteric areas of study for decades, and likely much longer. But in my experience, the best explanation for how to understand what densities are and how they differ from dimensions is described in a series of books known as The Law of One, the Raw Material. In these 5 books, a channeled collective of entities who simply call themselves Ra deliver impeccably detailed answers to various questions regarding the nature of reality, the universe, extraterrestrials, reincarnation, and many other topics. Ra explains that life exists on different planes of consciousness and physicality, starting from first density, going all the way up to 8th density. This is called an octave of densities, which repeats infinitely. But let's not go there right now. According to Ra, the density we find ourselves in as human beings is referred to as third density. An easy way to understand what that means is to look at what we call the animal kingdom. According to Ra's model, animals have second density consciousness, aka animal consciousness, making them second density, third dimensional beings, just as humans are third density, third dimensional beings. Densities typically refer to levels of consciousness, or how expanded an individual's consciousness is, and dimensions refer to levels of physicality, space, and time. The higher the density, the more expanded the consciousness. An easy way to think about this, if we imagine consciousness as a material substance, density would refer to how densely packed full of consciousness something is. This is why you don't have 8th density, third dimensional beings, because the vessel would be so packed full of consciousness that it would explode. Much like electricity running through a computer, the body or vessel must have the appropriate hardware to support the amount of consciousness running through it. This is also why planets and beings of all types must, at some point, evolve to higher spatial dimensions as the density of their consciousness increases. In these higher dimensions, the hardware of planetary and humanoid vessels are much more equipped to house higher levels of consciousness. If that is all a little confusing or difficult to think about, don't worry. You will most likely understand the stories I have to share, whether or not you fully grasp these concepts. Frankly, I'm not sure I completely understand them either. It's nearly impossible to imagine other dimensions or densities other than the one we currently find ourselves in. When the ETs bring me to their realm, my level of consciousness increases to match it, and when I return, I have to do my best to translate something I experienced multidimensionally into a narrative that makes sense in the linear time of our third dimension, which is why I felt it important to try and explain this before we get into the fun stuff. My piece of the puzzle. This book is about more than just my experiences. It's also about sharing my unique perspective on many tangentially related issues. Each experiencer has a piece of the puzzle that no one else has, and if we can be a little more fearless about sharing what we've seen, I believe that our stories have the power to broaden the awareness of those who have not had these experiences but wish to know more. Maybe they'll feel inspired to volunteer to be contacted themselves. It is believed by experiencers and others in this community that the human race must reach a critical mass of believers in order for the ETs to begin the process of first contact with the people of Earth. This is the term for when a more advanced civilization from another world approaches a developing one such as ours in order to welcome them into galactic society. It is my hope that this book will help with that process in some way. For those of us that have had contact, we have searched for answers not only about what happened and who was responsible, but also why. I've often wondered whether I might have been appointed by some ET group as a guide for friends and family who may look to someone they know and trust to help them understand certain planetary changes that may be about to occur. Perhaps I've been instructed to write this book for that very reason. When I have searched deep within myself for the answer to why these things have happened to me, it always comes back to this. At least a part of why I'm here on this planet at this time is to help the people in my life, and perhaps others, to mentally and spiritually prepare for an impending global shift, namely first contact. And while I believe that this is not actual first contact, given that we've been visited all throughout our development by these beings, and they have chosen to largely remain hidden, there may still be an event or events on the horizon where they will introduce themselves to us on a global scale. I've always had a subtle yet clear feeling inside that I am here to help with that and to contribute towards bringing it here in whatever way I can. Believe me, that is hard to say out loud without feeling like a total weirdo. It has taken me about 30 years to come to terms with the fact that this is a real part of who I am and not some delusion of grandeur. Others, like myself, have been going through highly abnormal experiences almost daily, our entire lives, waiting for the right time to do something with what we've seen and what we've awakened to. This book is my contribution to a much larger process that is unfolding. A peek behind the veil. So I want to preface this entire book by saying that I do not claim nor do I delude myself into thinking that I've got this whole thing figured out or that I'm some sort of authority on the subject of ETs and or interdimensional beings. Over the past 80 years or so, a pervasive belief system has evolved surrounding the subject of alien abduction, ET contact, UFOs, New Age spirituality, etc. This belief system has given experiencers and the like a community and a framework for understanding this phenomena. Yet, the entire thing is booby-trapped and infested with charlatans, grifters, misinformation agents, contradictory testimonies, and a myriad of other problematic philosophies that have become dogmatic and dismissive of anything that doesn't fit within that model. So, with that said, some of the ideas in this book may support those beliefs, and some of them may not. It has always been my intention to speak my truth, and to be thoughtful and calculated about what I choose to share. It is my understanding that the ETs would be the first to admit that they do not know everything, nor are they gods of any kind, at least those that do not wish to deceive us. Throughout the unfolding of events, truths, and lessons of my life, I have persisted in trying to stay grounded, balanced, and fair in my personal assessment and analysis of what I've pieced together. I am in no way trying to preach to any specific choir, nor am I trying to upset anyone with this material. I do, however, feel very strongly that I have been guided to share my understanding of the big picture in order to be of service to those that read this and to stay faithful to the task I have been assigned. And I know that some of you reading this may feel a kind of ick, or a feeling that I believe I'm a chosen one, that this entire story is going to be one big fat, look at me, look how special I think I am. I might think the same thing if I were in your shoes. But when I say that I feel I have been chosen to do this, I don't mean I've been chosen by God. I mean that I've been chosen by whatever group of beings is contacting me, and they're not gods. Similar to the way that we submit resumes and are chosen for a job, that is closer to what this is than being chosen by God. So, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to speak about this without sounding like I think I'm special. In my opinion, either everyone is special or no one is. I choose to believe in the former rather than the latter. As far as contactees go, there seems to be no rhyme or reason behind why these beings choose the people that they choose. We suspect it has something to do either with DNA or perhaps relationships that our souls have had with them in previous incarnations, but most of us never really get to know the real reason. As you read this, I ask that you keep an open mind. Suspend any preconceived judgments wherever possible, and don't let my story dissuade you from the fact that we are not alone in the universe, nor have we ever been. In the end, I believe we are all infinite, multidimensional beings having a human experience, and therefore, on some level, far beyond our current ability to understand, we do know exactly what's going on, what life is, what the universe is, and so on. It's only from this human perspective that we find ourselves in the dark, ignorant and severed from the knowledge our ancient souls must surely possess. In the law of one material, this is called the veil of forgetting. The idea that we must all check our infinite wisdom at the door and surrender to whatever our earthly incarnations have in store for us. These beings have given me a peek behind that veil, and this book is my attempt to share as much of what I've seen with you as possible. Thank you. Sometime very soon, I believe that we will experience a new paradigm, which includes the world we've always known in all of its complexity and the irrefutable truth that we share this planet, this solar system, this galaxy, this universe, with more forms of life than we could ever previously fathom. It is my hope and my intuitive sense that this book will be a guide for some as this new paradigm unfolds. Thank you for choosing to embark on this strange and mystifying journey with me as we seek to uncover that which, on another plane of existence, we already know. Strap yourself in and prepare for a very unusual ride. This is my story.